when people like say things and they're people who have never worked in their life, it's kind of hard to like take their critique as something that's valuable. You go do something and then I will think that what you're telling me holds some water.
Hi there, and welcome to this week's episode of Pickles and Pasta with Steph and Jay. This week, I'm going to play Jay. Steph's going to be Steph because she's really good at it. This week, we've got an interesting one, I think, talking about feedback and critique and how that affects us, how we're affected by it. When we thought about this, talked about this as an option, at first I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. Like that's a thing. And, I think it's a good topic. I think probably a lot of people have to deal with this about we talk about it actually without talking about it. We talk about it, I think. So I'm curious. I mean, I'm sure you've had some time to think about this from your side, can you think of like a situation or a story or something like where you got feedback and you were like, whoa, where did that come from? Or what are they talking about? Or anything to kind of open up with?
Yeah, well, I mean, as a founder of a brand and a brand that was kind of modeled after something that my father said, so it involved my family in a way. And when I started Have Some Fun Today, I really wanted the buy-in from my family because I felt that it was something that could really unify us after my dad passed in a way. And, there was so much excitement about the brand.
It's such a beautiful thing to do. I mean, that the fact that you did this, it's just so beautiful.
Thank you. I mean, I thought it was. I was very excited to do it.
Right.
But it was interesting as I was doing it and I started producing t-shirts and, the people all have comments, you can't help but get people to make comments about all the things you make and what they like and what they don't. And the better people know you, the more comfortable they feel with expressing, negative things. I mean, and in particular, siblings, so like I would make, for example, a t-shirt and, I have 3 sisters and a brother and I got different comments from everybody. Oh, I like this, or I don't like that, or you're making them too small and they need to be bigger. And it's like, it kind of comes back to you really can't please everybody.
Ain't that the truth?
So that really happened. And, you make a handbag and it's like, again, you can't please everybody. So there are all these little nuances that I was told, all the things that they more so didn't like than liked. Often people will tell you things they don't like rather than tell you all the things they do like. And I always find that to be interesting. But, because I went to Parsons, I learned from like day one that you should not get so attached, like personally attached to your work. And so I kind of, I've always navigated all the design work I do with very little emotional attachment to how people felt. I just never took it personally. So
you got critiqued from like the best of the best.
Yeah, it was part of our curriculum. We got critiqued every single week. So I'm very used to it. And I was able.
Hold on, let's just don't just skip over that. Don't just skip. Okay. Hold on. You didn't get critiqued we all get critiqued every day, okay? You didn't just get critiqued. You got critiqued by the best in the business at that time. Like some of the biggest names in fashion were looking at your work and critiquing it.
And
Like,
picking it apart,
yeah,
picking it apart.
that's incredible. Like that's such great training.
Why is this, what is this seam doing? Look at your top stitching. That's not perfect. Yeah, very minute things. And so
Like, give me some names. Come on, just stop it already. Like,
Michael Kors the guy who was, the designer who I was assigned to. And Michael Kors would come every 2 weeks and he would, go through all of our designs, and we would get up there in front of the class and we would speak to Michael. Our garments would be there that we made, that we designed, that we sewed, that we draped. I mean, we did everything. And so I know I may sound like I'm glossing over this, but going to Parsons was like you had a magnifying glass held up to you in every aspect of what you did and also who you were
yeah.
and how you presented yourself. Everything was critiqued all the time. And yes, from the best of the best. So, that helped me kind of navigate all of the things I later did in life without getting upset if someone didn't like something. I have such detachment and I really look at things from a very purely functional, status, basically. Whether it was have some fun today or it was, an interior design project I did I've had so many clients over the years. So, I'm very attuned to listening to feedback because, I really want to listen to what they're really saying. Sometimes people will make a critique of something, but it's not really about the thing. It may be about the way you presented it or really about themselves and how they're feeling about themselves. So critique is so nuanced.
Yeah, it's a very, very tricky thing. Just obviously I know these stories and I know, look, I've been around, long enough, and there have been people that have said something to you, and sometimes it sticks. Like it really, like it hurts. Like it doesn't feel good. Like because you really like that person, or you respect, excuse me, you really like that person, or you respect that person, and they say something like it makes you think, like, and it can bother you sometimes. But I think you had that early training from like the best of the best, right? And so you're like, okay, if I can take it from them, I can take it from somebody else. And it's an interesting thing. I mean, look, first of all, everybody has an opinion. Like that's just the way it is, and you're not going to change that. And I know, and it's fine. And there are people that just give an opinion, and then there's people that give feedback, and there's people that give critique, and it can get a little gray, like it can get a little mushy about what does that mean, and like, sometimes somebody gives you feedback and they don't even understand your business, or they don't understand the product, or they don't understand the style, or whatever it is. I mean, it could be anything, right? It could be somebody who eats very bland food, and you make something that has a little bit of flavor, and they're like, I don't like it. And they're like, oh, but it's the best. It's the best one I ever made. Like it was so perfect. The spices were just right. And like, I don't like it. And you feel weird, right? So it's like, that's not helpful. That's not, that's not the right type of thing. And when you get into, in the creative and the artistic work that you do, something might not resonate with someone. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, and so I think it's tricky when you're the one doing it. I think the different opinions and the feedback and stuff, I think it's tricky. It's tricky to know how to take it sometimes.
Well, there's a difference between critique in order to help something be better and criticism that really is more directed at the person and how you
You
feel
think
about.
so? You think it's that?
I think that there's a difference.
Sure,
And
sure.
a lot of people in my personal experience as a designer who created a brand in a small town that was operating on a larger level, we're talking about operating a brand that is like seen globally, but here I am in this small microcosm of a town, and maybe like people who are close to me, you know, siblings, neighbors, people that I know in the town. I think sometimes they don't realize that if you're going to criticize something, make it be useful. If you're going to criticize something because you feel a certain feeling about the creator, that's not really helpful. And so that's kind of unnecessary. But if you are truly looking at the product and the brand and you think that you can help it be better, then that's okay to do. I've had people like kind of make not so kind or helpful comments about, the sizing of things. And so I would like try to make it better. I understood where they were coming from, and so I would go back and okay, and I need to offer larger sizes so that I don't offend certain people who think I make things too small. So I would go back and make XXL, 3XL. I would make these really big sizes. And, sometimes they were then actually hard to sell. So it wasn't really a helpful critique, and maybe I should have, not taken it to heart. But, I went out and, it cost more money to make these extra sizes and all that. So sometimes I think you bend over backwards. I know I have, because I want to make everybody happy and I want people to think that I'm listening to them.
Right.
But sometimes maybe it's not necessary, because maybe the critique was really just to make me feel bad and not really to help me as a brand founder. There's all different types of criticism and critique. And I know, like, when people would ask me for not so much a critique, but they would ask me what I think. I think that I take that question very seriously, because I know what it feels like. And I think I do know how to give a good critique that'll help maybe to make their product better. And I go at it from that viewpoint. And, sometimes it is hard for me to, like, when we've worked with different marketing people and they've given me, design things to look at. Sometimes I had a difficult time doing that because I didn't have a lot of experience articulating why I didn't like something. And sometimes I think if you don't have the right language, it can be difficult to articulate what you like and don't like about something. So I've run into that.
Yeah. I mean, there's different kinds of feedback too, right? I mean, there's, a critique thing, we can kind of get into that, but like there's emotional, technical, and strategic, right? Like, and when you're on the receiving side, you're not always prepared for it. You don't necessarily know you don't know what someone's going to say. And it's tricky because you want feedback, right? Like no matter what you're doing, if you're building a website or a platform, or if you're doing a movie or a video, or you're creating an event, or you're making a physical product, or whatever it is, whether it's clothing or whether it's a piece of art, or if you're have a restaurant and you're making sandwiches or something like that. I mean, you want feedback. Like it's very important to get feedback, but you don't necessarily always know what's coming. And, depending on what comes at you, you have to kind of react in a certain way. Like you don't want to get pissed off. You don't want to hurt the person. You don't want to push back. You don't want to be defensive, but you have to also think about like, what are they really saying? What do they really mean? Sometimes you just have to let people speak, right? Sometimes it's just be like, I'm going to just let you say what you want to say, but you're not really bringing me anything. You're not helping my process in any way. And And then sometimes they're very specific, like they narrow in on like, well, here's the issue. Like, here's the thing. I'm trying to help you. Like, and that's great when someone's legitimately trying to help you, not hurt you. But it's very tricky to kind of navigate that and to kind of understand it and to not let it affect you one way or the other. Like to not, if you're dismissive, that's not probably helping either. But if
Right.
you all of a sudden say, okay, now I'm going to change things. I mean, I get advised that, and I get my fair share of people try to give me advice because I tend to listen to people, and that sometimes is not so good because people feel they can just talk for hours, and sometimes I've got other things to do. The one piece of advice I get is, you don't change everything. Every piece of feedback, don't you stop changing. Like you can't just all of a sudden, shit, we have to rework the deck again. Or no, we got to redo this again because someone's always going to have something to say. But when it's the tricky part in that is sometimes somebody comes up with something that's really, really smart, or sometimes they come up with something that you were thinking yourself and you kind of chose not to make that change, or you chose to listen to a teammate or someone on your, someone who works for you or a partner or whatever. And in your heart that you should do something different. And then someone outside says it. And then you're like, on the one hand, you're like, shit, I was right. And then you're also like, shit, now I got to fix it. But you kind of can't all the time. So it's an interesting thing of where someone's coming from, how that affects you. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you have the same
Well,
situation.
there are so many variables. I mean, there were times, throughout my life and different things where I would be told about criticism that other people had. They weren't actually coming to me with the criticism. I was hearing it third party. And that is completely
That's,
helpful. And it's also like,
that's
are
insulting.
these people qualified to critique what I'm doing?
So
And
that's a whole other thing, right?
yeah, and
That was, yeah.
that's a real thing. And you really have to understand, sometimes when I would hear through a third party, well, so and so thinks this. Well, then there were times when I thought, well, so and so is not qualified to give me any
Right.
criticism.
I know so and so, and I can tell you right now, they are not qualified.
So you have to like really, really understand, just because someone says something doesn't mean it really has any significance for what you're working on. And, you know, as a trained designer, it's rare that I open it up for people. I don't go out seeking other people to give me ideas. I don't seek it.
No.
Like I rarely do.
Don't seek it for ideas. You definitely don't seek it for ideas. I know that. And it's one of the many things I admire about you, because you do get new ideas and you do listen to people and you get ideas from them, but you don't seek the idea, which I think is pretty cool. But you do, and I think it's natural, you do, whether you outwardly do it or not, you do seek the feedback. You do seek somebody to say something about it, whether not conscious or not conscious. I mean, and I think many times it's conscious, like you do something and you show it, and you want the feedback, like you do want it, but it's a little bit also time and place. And I think that
Well,
gets tricky.
I think really what you're seeing is the fact that I'm very open. So I'm open to feedback. I don't necessarily listen to it, but to me, it's more information. So people always say, "Can I say something?" I'm like, "Sure, you can say whatever you want. I might not do it,
Or care.
well,
Sure, knock yourself out.
but that's just the way I operate because it gives me more information. It lets me know where people stand, what people think. Ultimately, I'm going to make my own decision. And I think
That's what you should.
when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, like this is not a vote. This is my process. This is my design. This is my brand. This is the way I do things. This is my art. I will do it the way I want to. You're open to say whatever you want, and I'll take it as information.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've both run into it in different situations where, like, we get feedback, or someone, who may be very intelligent, right? Who may be very qualified in certain things, but not necessarily in the thing that we're working on at the time. And, they love to give you their opinion, or they love to give you this critique, or they're like, oh, well, you should move, this should be on the left side of the page, or this should be bigger, or whatever. And you're like, you have no expertise in this, like whatsoever. Like, you are so unqualified to be opening your mouth right now. And it's like, just because you're smart or you have experience in XYZ, like, you're not helping. And it's difficult sometimes to kind of be polite about it and just kind of, okay, thank you, whatever. But I think you feel it. I think when people say things to you, you still hear them. Like, they still process through your whole body, anyway. And it can be a little tricky to kind of like not let it get to you. But I also, and I don't know, maybe I'm sensitive to this for certain things like my father did or said, and the way he kind of operated, which came from this beautiful place, but could just make you want to punch a wall. Where people will tell you something that you've either said it out loud, or you're obviously not skilled at that thing. And they may be, and they say, well, this isn't going to work. You got to do it like this and this. And you're like, can you help me then? And they're like, no, you do it. And they're like, I'm like, screw you. Like, I can't do it. Like, I don't have the skill to do that. Like, don't ask me to do that. Like, you're not helping me at that point. You're helping me by saying, okay, this thing here that isn't really working. Obviously you don't know how to do it, and you don't have anybody on your team to do it, but I know how to do it. So I'm going to help you do that. I'm going to do that for you. Like, that's valuable. Critique or feedback. Okay. You're coming from this beautiful place of that you want to help me. That's beautiful. Like, that's beautiful. But when they do that thing of like, and since I opened my mouth, I guess I have to tell my father story of what he would do. So he wouldn't ever give me necessarily like a full answer to something. He wanted me to figure it out. Like, that's why I say he's coming from a beautiful place. But if I would say something like, how do you spell hippopotamus? He would say HIP. Silence. Dude, Leo, I got that far. The HIP part I got. The potamus part, I don't know. How about the hippopotamus part? Like, where are you? You're like, well, you know. I was like, if I knew, I wouldn't ask you, would I? So when I get like that half advice sort of thing, it just brings me back to like my 5-year-old self of like just wanting to spell hippopotamus. So I don't know. I find that like that's the sort of stuff that great. Now I just opened up to our audience. Like, if you really want to annoy Jay, this is how to do it. But yeah.
I was just going to say that I think it depends on how generous someone is, because there have been times in my life where I've been around certain people and they were needing help, or they are asking me for help. And if I can do something that'll help someone's project, and they're asking for advice and critique, basically, there have been times when I said, look, it would be better if this, and this happened. And then I went in and helped them with that.
Right.
So I get what you're saying, but it really depends on the generosity of the people around you who you're asking for advice or to take a look at a project or anything, really. It could just be how you live your life. It could just be,
it could be anything, right? It could be anything.
Like, look, I can see you're having a tough time here. I'm going to help you.
Yeah. But that goes back to like what we said before. It's like, everybody has an opinion. So they feel good about themselves. Well, I told him what's wrong. Like, but you didn't help me move it forward. The purpose of helping someone, whether it's critique or whatever, it's to help them move forward. To just tell them to do something that they don't have the skill to do or don't have the expertise to do, it's not really helpful. Like, you gotta, in my opinion, like, that's what I think. People that just mouth off stuff, it's just not interesting to me. Like, it's just not. Like, I don't think, again, I listen to it, I hear it, and sometimes it's very valid, and sometimes it's something that I can do something with. But when somebody is just doing it for themselves, not for me, and not that I want anything from anybody, but just in general, when they do it for somebody else, and I'm just as annoyed. Like, if you want to help somebody, help somebody. If you don't want to help them, just step aside,
Right.
because maybe somebody else does. And but again, I think as creatives for one, and as entrepreneurs, business owners for two, it's very, very, very different than um, people who have jobs, as important as their job may be. And this is not criticism on anybody. I'm not critiquing anybody here. It's not putting anybody down. People that have regular jobs that do really good things, really important things, many of them making a hell of a lot more money than we are, they clock out. Like at a certain point, they clock out. Like whether it's weekend or whether it's 6 o'clock, whatever it is. And that's it. They clock out. That's not how we work. Not just you and me, definitely not you and me, but people who have like their own thing, they're working at night, they're working on the weekends, this, always thinking about something, whatever. That criticism or critique really, it stays with you. It comes back sometimes hours later, days later. I know it has for me. I know it has for you, because you brought up like, oh, then that person said that thing, and like, the hell, where were they? Why did they do that? Like, what was the purpose? Like, because it irks you, like, and because it's so much more important to you. It's not a job. It's not like, if this doesn't work out, okay, I'm going to go get something else because I'm qualified and I know I can get another job. So it's just very different. I'm not saying this that people should not advise entrepreneurs. No, do it. But I'm saying there is that after effect that I think we all feel, that I think is a little bit different. I think.
It can feel personal. It can feel not about the thing and more about you as an individual. And that's when it's a little tricky,
It's
you
because
know?
you are your brand, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
it's that's the tricky thing. And we've had this conversation too, where people have said, I have to be more front facing, I have to be more out there, and blah, because I'm the brand. And I'm like, no, I purposely called my companies not my name. Like my first business when I was a baby, it was called Jay's Custom Stringing, because that's what you did. It was Joe's Plumber, Steve's Coffee Shop, and Jay's Custom Stringing. Like, that's what you did. And I didn't know better. And then everybody knew my name and I didn't know theirs. And I was like, this isn't going to work. And I purposely said, I won't ever do that again. I won't ever put my name in it. And the reason is partially for that, but partially because I want the company to be the company. I want it to be able to survive. If I have to step away for whatever reason, I don't want that to be the end of the business. I mean, there's people that rely on us, rely on me and rely on you. And I want that to be able to go on. I want them to be able to win. So it's it's interesting. And I think I think we probably may have seen this. Like, look, there's the famous, line from The Godfather, it's not personal, it's just business, right?
Yeah.
We all say it. We've all said it and we've all heard it because it's from The Godfather, and we should all know lines from The Godfather by now. I don't care if you're 5 years old, go watch The Godfather. But um, then there's, Dave Grutman came out with his new book, which apparently now is a New York Times bestseller. Way to go, Grut. And his book is something like It Is Personal, or Take It Personal, or something like that. And that's been his driving force in his business. And he speaks about that. I mean, obviously in the book, but he openly speaks about that. And he's clearly a hugely successful entrepreneur and hospitality guy. And anybody that's ever been to Miami has been to, if you're in any sort of scene, you've been to one of his places and whatever. But he's like, I always took it personal. He's like, I take it personal. Like when someone doesn't like a meal or a club or it's like, I take it personally. Like, I got to think like, this is my place. I have to make it right. You can also drive yourself crazy like that. But, for him, that strategy works. And I tend to lean more that way than the other.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd get pissed off if someone unsubscribed to my emails that was a friend. Like, I'd be like, so and so unsubscribed. My friends who like were working with me on the business initially, we would joke about it. I mean, I've relaxed obviously since then, but I do take it personally, even though I really try not to. I really try to keep it in check, but I know the people that I know who have bought have some fun today, and I know the ones who haven't.
Yeah.
Like, I do.
Yeah.
I know, because I see all the orders. And so, you kind of carry that with you. And when people like say things and they're people who have never worked in their life, it's kind of hard to like take take their critique as something that's valuable. You go do something and then I will think that what you're telling me has holds some water,
Yeah.
so
It's yeah,
salt with a
I
grain
feel
of
you.
salt.
Yeah, I feel you. When someone hasn't done it, and I don't necessarily do what you do, but when someone really hasn't put themselves out there or whatever it may be, sometimes it's hard to take them too seriously on the criticism because it's like, or the critique or the feedback, whatever. It's a little tricky when they come in like, well, we know better. You're like, okay, based on what?
Yeah, they don't usually say anything like that. They just might make some comments and who knows why. I mean, there's the famous quote my dad loved, the man in the arena. And there have been times doing this brand that I have gone back to that quote. Like, I'm the man in the arena in my own way, like down and dirty, working my ass off. And, for the people who have never done something, you just don't have a leg to stand on to criticize someone who is down in it,
Right.
giving it their all.
I think that those people can help, like they can give you some feedback, right? They can give you some their opinions about things. I think that's fine. But I think when they come at it from that like they know better sort of approach, it has just a negative tone to it and it becomes very hard to hear.
Yeah, it's also hard to hear because, like, do I only do things wrong? Like, how about all the things that I did right? So, if you wanted me to hear your criticism, let's go into it with, well, you did this right, but this I don't like, and this is why. That would be helpful.
Yeah. I think, that's look, not everybody knows how to do that, right? And that goes across life, right? Like they don't necessarily know how to do it when they're helping, when they're giving it to a friend or a business owner or whatever. They don't necessarily do it when they're talking to their personal friends, like about personal stuff. Like some people just don't know how to communicate, how to give feedback that could be helpful. I'm not going to say any, I'm not going to get too specific, but there are a number of people we know that have been in relationships that one person said the other person was garbage. And they keep hearing this crap about this person and it's not true. Like it just isn't true. And they have no place doing that. They have no place poisoning a situation like that. But they're giving their feedback, they're giving their opinion, they're giving their critique of the relationship that a person is in. And it's like, why? What's your end game here? And I think there's lots of different situations like that that people don't either learn or think about how do I be a helpful human? How do I help the person that I care about or that I admire or that I would like to see do well in whatever they're doing, whether it's in school, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in their work, whether it's in whatever.
Yeah.
Should be coming from a place of like, how can I add value to that person? When they come from this, like, how do I knock them down? How do I show them that they're wrong? Like, these are all negative words. These are all negative thoughts. And so they're not, when they're in that mindset, they're not able to say, hey, I really love what you're doing with this. I think this new collection is really amazing. There's a couple of things I noticed that I think could make it even more amazing. And that then you could be like, okay, now you're listening, obviously, because you've been warmed up. And it's not that they're full of shit. They're being real. They're being like, hey, here's the pluses, really good. Here's a couple of minuses. Let's talk about it. Then it's like this app. Then you can have a real dialogue with someone. You can either maybe explain something that they didn't see or didn't understand, or you could be like, you know what? That's really valid. I didn't see that. That's very good. Okay, I can't fix this, but I can learn from this for the next time. I think people that do that, deserve all the credit because they're coming from a beautiful place and they're just being helpful. And I think it's a great thing.
I mean, you know that I do my customer service, and That's a perfect example though, because people are either calling me or writing to me or commenting in public ways where they want to tell me something about a product or the brand, whatever. And I really, over the past 12 years, I've had to deal with a lot of unhappy people at times. I mean, it's not like it's a lot. There's probably like, honestly, in 12 years, I probably had 20 instances where
Yeah,
I've
you
had
have very, very low, very, very low.
not like a lot, but I've had to. And I swear to God, I think like 9 out of 10 times it ended up where that person was actually apologizing to me.
I love when that happens.
And I'm like, but it's just that I'm listening to them. I'm owning up where we fell short and I'm doing what I can to make it right.
Yeah.
And that is a constructive give and take.
Wasn't there one not too long ago you flipped one who gave you like a really crap review? And they went back and gave us 5 stars?
Yeah, yeah. And it was really that like they weren't really thinking about what they were saying in terms of like what it was. It was just like it was more like an emotional reaction and a comparison to something that has no relevance. And so I think a lot of times these comments people make, they're not from an an educated position on what we're talking about. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's just like their mood or their opinion that has no relevance.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And so I also wanted to kind of touch a little bit on the difference between like, feedback or critique in just a general friend or business relationship or situation and how you deliver it as a leader. Like when you have people that work for you or that you're the manager, or you're the owner, whatever, and you have to give feedback to people that do work for you and how tricky that is because that's a whole other animal, really. I mean, I could go on for a really long time, but I won't. Uh, but that's a whole other thing. How do you keep them motivated? But you got to let them know that what they did was not right. Do you compliment too much, not enough? Like, there's a lot of nuance and a lot of intricacies. I mean, really, it's probably a whole other episode, quite frankly. But there's something there that, and you and I have talked about this, where like you'll see like how I react with a situation with somebody, and you're like, God, you're being kind, or you're being this, or you're being whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but you got to realize I got 5 other things cooking with this person, or I've got these 2 things that I have to think about, and I have to think about what they've got going on. Like I know they've got XYZ
Yeah.
going on, and I have to kind of think about that a little differently. And on the one end, my first reaction may be to like just lose my shit, and like, yeah, that's not productive for me or for them. And if I'm pissed off about something, okay, let me get pissed off alone, and then let me look at the situation because the goal, again, is to move things forward. So, and again, sometimes it's like, okay, this person is just not a good fit. There's too many times this went wrong. And I've had it with multiple people throughout my different business career, different business. And sometimes people would, and I've had it a few different ways where people will be like, you got to get rid of this person. You got to get rid of them. And then I'll be like, you guys aren't seeing something that I'm seeing. And so I have to guide them and deal with that. And then other times you do have to cut it off. And so it's a very tricky thing and how to speak to those people in a way that is positive in whatever that end result may be.
Look, there are people who are nice and there are people who are not so nice. We happen to be 2 nice people. And, obviously we're here to help other people. But we do have to take into account the different personalities that we're
Yeah.
dealing with. And I think it's very nuanced depending on where someone's coming from. And we've had these interns and they all have different personalities. And you really have to work with, the personality and know, well, I have to be gentle, but I want to help them learn. So I'm going to point out in a gentle but structured way because really you want to help them be better at whatever it is they're doing. And honestly, it's really how I conduct myself across the board.
Yeah.
I try to be very, I try to be really fair, and I try to be kind, but I'm very clear when something is right and something is wrong. I try to say it in the nicest way possible. I'm not going to compliment something that was shit, but I'm also not going to make them cry. So there
Well,
is, I mean,
sometimes
I have
you
made some
have,
people cry, but
you
on
have,
purpose,
yeah.
you know.
Sometimes it's required. Sometimes people need real firm, like, okay, this might, this might hurt, but like, no, 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 this was not cool. This was really bad, and you have to know how bad this is. You have to feel how bad this is. But ideally, if you're close enough to the situation, you're close enough to the team, or the person, I don't mean, personal relation wise, but just if you're close enough to what's going on, it shouldn't get to that place. But again, sometimes it does. Sometimes people have other shit going on in their lives, which they don't necessarily share with you, and or you're not privy to, and they start doing things or acting in a way that isn't cool, and you don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
And then you have to now give them criticism because they didn't do something or they were late or whatever, and it can get awkward, and I think it's important. That's again why I think it's important to kind of be as close as you can to these situations, and then you can maybe pick up on it. Like you can know, okay, you know what, I think they're having a bad day. This has nothing to do with me. I still have a business to run. Let me figure out how to deal with that, different than I've got to reprimand them or I've got to whatever about. I got to really get in and show them why this color doesn't work here or why the lines aren't straight or whatever it is. And you have to kind of think about those things. So it's I'm just saying my point, if there is one, is that it's different. I think it's different when you're in like a managerial sort of position and offering criticism and guidance and support to help them be better. And you see it. Like we both do it with the interns. Like we have some amazing people on our team. I mean, they're fantastic. I mean, but I really don't even like calling them interns because it's like they're really good people and they really do good things. It has like a negative connotation. I don't see it negatively. I think it's great. But we're always looking to be like, okay, how do we teach them something? I mean, yes, they're doing stuff to help the business, of course, but how do we teach them in the process?
Yeah.
Here's a new thing that you don't, let me show you how. And then of course they're not going to do it perfect right away. And then you go through it a little bit differently, and you have to have a little bit more patience. But sometimes what you get as the end result is just absolutely tremendous. So
Absolutely.
in the long run, it's definitely worth it. You agree?
Yes, sir.
Well, listen, when I give you feedback, it comes from a good place always.
I mean, I have no problems. I mean, obviously I tell you everything I'm doing, and you're welcome to say anything about any of the stuff, and sometimes I listen and sometimes I don't, I'm pretty open about how I handle my work.
Yeah.
I'm not like,
No, you are. You are. No, and look, I mean, like we both talk about, like there's time and place, right? Like sometimes, okay, this just isn't the time to have this conversation. This isn't the time to talk about this thing.
yeah,
And I think that's important. Look, I mean, I think, the best advice, I mean, and I know we try our best to kind of be helpful to people. Hopefully listening to us chat away is good, but, kind of not a call to action, but a call to think. You know, I think it's good to have like our own checklist of like when feedback's coming to us, whether we're asking for it or it's just coming without us asking for it, to kind of think about these things about, is this person aligned with my vision? Are they coming from a good place? Do they have the expertise to really help me? Is it a personal thing, or are they really helping me with this project or business that I'm working on? Having that checklist before that person even opens their mouth or before you read their email, I think it helps us listen and at least get something out of it. I think when we don't know what's coming, it can throw you off. And if you have a wall up, that doesn't help either. But if you're like, okay, I'm ready. I know who it's coming from. I know whatever. You don't necessarily know what they're going to say, but at least you kind of have much more of an open mind to it, and your feet are balanced, like you're standing firmly on the ground, so they're not going to knock you over. And I think that's helpful. I think that would be something I would suggest, because I've been there where like people have said things to me and I'm like, man, that just ruined my day. Like I am so upset right now. Like I can't believe they said that, and I don't want to live like that. I don't want
Yeah.
to do that. So
I think it takes a high level of discernment to be able to discern where someone's coming from. Are they coming from a helpful place? Are they coming from a personal attack place? And to be able to listen and then make up your own mind. And
yeah.
that's how I roll.
I think that's key. I mean, and then I'll give Leo a little bit of credit. I mean, he always did say, you should always take advice from somebody else. Don't just do just because you think so. It's always good to get advice. But when you go into someone, even if they're like the biggest expert in whatever it is, always go in with your brain. I remember he always said, I was like, whose brain am I going to go in with? But it's just, he always said that to me, like, and it's, I'm not saying it's been successful all the time, but I mean, it's really been something I've always kind of taken to heart. Like, I think it's important. Yeah, I think that's kind of it. I think that's just good advice. I mean, I'm sure Leo would give it to you if he was here right now, he would say that as well. I'm going to wrap, unless you have something else.
No, I'm good.
I'm going to wrap up with a question that we kind of came up with, which I think is an interesting question. And just for everybody, I'm just going to ask it. I'm going to leave it there. If you removed all outside opinions, would your work be better or worse? That's obviously it's no, I'm not asking for an answer, but it's an interesting question to think about. Like,
I think I already do that.
I'm gonna just leave it there for the rest of us to kind of give that a little thought. So anyway, thank you all for listening and spending a little time with us. We really appreciate it. Always a pleasure to see you, my love. And we will see you again next week. Bye.
Bye.